Canadian World is a Japanese theme park about Canada, with a replica of the farm from Anne of Green Gables. And this year, Crunchyroll has licensed Anne Shirley, the latest in a long line of media adapting that same Canadian novel. But why Anne Shirley and not Heidi, Jo March, or Laura Ingalls? That's actually one hell of a story itself. Half a century in the making, about two very different places and women, and how a shared love of good art can rise above geopolitics and turmoil. But before Anne made her trek across the Pacific, and then back a few times in anime form, she was born out of Lucy Maud Montgomery's mind 10,000 kilometers away on Prince Edward Island, Canada. That's up by Maine and around 6,200 miles from Tokyo for my fellow geographically challenged Americans. And in 1905, a newspaper clipping kickstarts the idea for the novel. Elderly couple apply to orphan asylum for a boy. By mistake, a girl is sent to them. Anne of Green Gables follows Anne Shirley, a vivacious, sprightly youth adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, elderly siblings that are in need of help on their farm. The rest is standard coming-of-age and slice-of-life fare. Friendships, bullying, causing mischief, and pursuing dreams. With my favorite mischief being when Anne accidentally gets her friend Diana drunk on wine. Ah, the ignorance and stupidity of youth. Not that I know anything about over-consuming communion wine or anything like that. But despite taking place in the late 19th century, the book wasn't actually published until 1908, and while it enjoyed eventual success, it was rejected by publishers several times. And even once published, the New York Times was not a fan. I'm gonna add that to my list of don't trust everything a critic says. We could even file that right next to Fred Astaire being told he couldn't act and could only dance a little. And if that's a little, I'm dead. And while the New York Times was panning the novel, Mark Twain, also a fan of precocious child characters, called Anne Shirley the most lovable child in literature since Lewis Carroll's Alice. As a last dig at the Times, Montgomery supposedly based Anne's appearance on model and vaudeville actress Evelyn Nesbit, which, 1, makes the line from Miss Rachel about her being homely tell me Miss Rachel is blind, stupid, or both, and 2, as a history nerd, it makes me giggle that lovable Anne was based on a 20th century Helen of Troy. You see, Evelyn Nesbit was at the center of a 1906 murder trial called The Crime of the Century. There is a whole number in the musical Ragtime all about it. So how did a book, written halfway around the world, in English, make it to Japanese shores in the early 20th century? Two bits of history set the stage: the Meiji Restoration and Christian evangelism. I have a whole video on the history of Christmas in Japan, which you should totally check out, but the short version is that until the Meiji Restoration, Christianity was outlawed in Japan. With Japan no longer isolated and outlawing Christianity, missionaries could return. Missionaries like Loretta Leonard Shaw. Shaw had graduated with esteem, focusing on language and education, coincidentally like Anne Shirley in the book, and in 1904, she was accepted for a teaching role in Osaka, and she learned Japanese in a single year to do it. By 1932, she was overseeing the education of over 500 girls at a time when their education was not prioritized. And this leads us to Hanako Muraoka, a Japanese woman who had received a Western education at Tokyo Iwa Jogakuen, a school founded by the Methodist Church of Canada, the same faith denomination as Loretta Shaw. You see, after Hanako graduated, she began translating children's stories into Japanese and English. In 1926, her family's publishing business went bankrupt, and Hanako's son passed away. Katayama Hiroko, a poet, fellow translator, and friend, pushed Hanako to translate Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper, thinking it might provide a bit of normalcy in a time of grief. It was around this time that Hanako and Loretta Shaw finally met at the Christian Literature Society of Japan. They took it upon themselves to represent their respective nations and suggest the best books their cultures had to offer. This continued for many years until 1939, when Shaw had to return to Canada due to her health and the stirrings of war. Shaw had delivered a copy of Anne of Green Gables to Hanako, who worked on the translation to Japanese in secret during World War II, knowing full well, if caught, it would be considered harboring contraband. It would later be published in 1952 under the title of Akage no An, or Red-Haired Anne. And if you want to learn more, some of the footage here is from the YouTube channel of Vancouver's Japanese Consulate. They have a video where they interviewed Hanako's granddaughter, Eri, because she wrote a biography about her grandmother's life, including the details around translating Anne of Green Gables. There's also Hanako and Anne, the live-action adaptation of that book. I'd wanted to watch it and learn more, but I wasn't able to stream it anywhere legitimate. The bits of footage I've used here are compiled from various promo trailers available on YouTube, so if you know where you can legally stream it, please let us know in the comments. We don't support or condone swashbuckling, and Japan's NHK operates in a similar manner to America's PBS. I mean, who would want to rob Elmo? Besides the obvious.
No! No, 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 no!
So now we know how Anne of Green Gables got to Japan, but we don't know why it was so well received. It probably helps that the United States widely distributed the book in Japanese libraries during occupation. Hanako's granddaughter floated that post-war Japan's financial instability caused people to resonate with Anne's modest lifestyle, and others say that it's Anne's spirit and imagination that make her appeal to the more subdued, passive Japanese culture. Regardless of why, it's clear the book was a hit. Remember, Canadian world. And apparently Prince Edward Island still welcomes Japanese tourists wanting to immerse themselves in Anne's homeland. Japan's World Masterpiece Theater, unrelated to the Masterpiece Theater you may be thinking of, adapted the novel into an anime in 1979. To date, it's still one of the crown jewels of that entire programming block. Maybe because this guy worked on it. World Masterpiece Theater's goal was to adapt educational, family-based stories from around the world, with a seemingly Disney-like obsession with orphans or single-parent families. So while Tom Sawyer, Little Women, and many others had their respective turn before World Masterpiece Theater ended in 1997, when the programming block came back briefly in 2007, it was Anne Shirley that made a second appearance. Budge Wilson's Before Green Gables, the prequel novel written for Anne's centennial anniversary, was adapted into its own anime in 2009. Which brings us to Anne Shirley, the Answer Studios' 2025 take on Anne of Green Gables. Admittedly, only a few of the episodes are out, but so far it is a faithful adaptation of the novel. And the animation is beautiful and stylized, reminding me of 70s and 80s anime, but with cleaner lines and digital accents. I would expect nothing less from the studio that worked on the likes of Golgo 13 and Your Name. Plus, it's nice to see a version of Anne that doesn't look like a Dickensian street urchin. Compared to the World Masterpiece Theater version, I'd say that the cinematic principle of show, don't tell is more prevalent in Anne Shirley. 1979's version has a narrator and much slower pacing. The first episode ending with Anne's arrival to Green Gables and a very perturbed Marilla. Meanwhile, Anne's adoption is all but settled by the end of Anne Shirley's first episode. Personally, now that I'm digging into this story again, I'm halfway between Anne and Matthew in age. I've occasionally fallen into the millennial malaise that my generation is stereotyped with that kind of goes hand in hand with the umpteenth once-in-a-generation event that we've all had to live through. But part of why I still love this story, especially in this age of cynicism, is the wonder that a new perspective can bring out of us. See? Matthew approves. Anne Shirley captures the whimsy, joy, and quiet desperation to belong that comes with growing up. Feelings that aren't singularly Canadian, Japanese, or old-timey. They're simply human. And that's why, even if you don't like a particular medium that a story comes in, you shouldn't write it off completely. My mission is trying to get folks to give anime, as an artistic medium, a chance. And this time, maybe some of my fellow weebs will pick up this anime's atypical source material. If you like this kind of historical dive into anime, or want to learn more about anime that are based on Western literature, let me know in the comments. I'm personally a big fan of Gankutsuo, a sci-fi, visually avant-garde anime based on the Count of Monte Cristo. And of course, Read or Die. You can watch Anne Shirley on Crunchyroll. And to learn more about the novel and its arrival in Japan, there are links in the description below. If you're new to anime and want to branch out based on familiar Western media, I would start here. And the almighty algorithm seems to think you'd like this video in particular. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next sermon.